Welcome, brave souls, to the realm of the unknown. Here, in the heart of darkness, we unravel the chilling tales that lurk in the shadows, stories that will grip your imagination and chill you to the core. Prepare yourself for spine-tingling narratives that delve into the depths of fear, where every whisper holds a secret and every shadow conceals a terror. Join our community of thrill-seekers as we explore the macabre, the mysterious, and the downright terrifying. But remember, once you enter, there's no turning back. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a moment of our haunting adventures. Are you ready to embrace the fear? The darkness awaits. The shadow in the wild. The dense, tangled vines of the Canthry jungle formed an impenetrable wall as the safari jeep inched forward. Its engine rumbled like a distant predator growling in the underbrush. 6 tourists, city dwellers far removed from the dangers of the wild, sat in the open vehicle, their excitement barely masking their nervous energy. Their guide, Arjun, was an experienced tracker who had navigated the perilous trails of Canthry for over a decade. Tonight, however, something felt different. The jungle was alive with its usual orchestra of chirps, howls, and rustling leaves. But there was an undercurrent of tension, a palpable unease that even Arjun couldn't ignore. "Stay close to the vehicle at all times," he warned, glancing at the group over his shoulder. "This place has its beauty, but it also has its teeth." The group chuckled nervously, chalking it up to dramatic flair. Among them were Priya and Vikram, a young couple documenting their adventure for social media. Jennifer, a zoology student fascinated by big cats. Ravi, an office worker on his first vacation in years. And a middle-aged businessman named Sahil, whose expensive DSLR hinted at his enthusiasm for wildlife photography. The plan was simple: an overnight safari to catch a glimpse of Canthry's legendary black panther. But as the jeep ventured deeper into the jungle, the wilderness began to feel less like a postcard and more like a predator's lair. The first sign: about an hour into the journey, the jeep reached a watering hole. The moonlight cast shimmering reflections on the surface, but the usual cacophony of animals drinking and playing was absent. The stillness was unnerving. "Strange," Arjun muttered. He scanned the area with his flashlight, its beams slicing through the darkness. Nothing. No deer, no birds, not even the telltale ripple of a crocodile lurking beneath the surface. "Where is everything?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Arjun didn't answer. Instead, he gestured for silence and turned off the jeep's engine. The oppressive quiet enveloped them, broken only by the occasional creak of branches swaying in the faint breeze. Then a low, guttural growl, drifted from the shadows. Jennifer clutched Vikram's arm. "Did you hear that?" Before anyone could respond, the growl was followed by a sharp, blood-curdling scream. It was human. Arjun grabbed his rifle. "Stay in the jeep," he barked, his authoritative tone leaving no room for argument. He disappeared into the underbrush, his flashlight bouncing wildly with each hurried step. The group sat in stunned silence, ears straining for any sound. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. Finally Arjun emerged, his face pale and his breath coming in ragged gasps. "What happened?" Sahil demanded, raising his camera instinctively. "I found a camp," Arjun said, his voice tight. "It's not good. We need to leave. Now." "But..." "Now." The abandoned camp. Despite Arjun's insistence, curiosity got the better of the group. They convinced him to show them the camp before leaving. With visible reluctance, he led them down a narrow trail to a small clearing. A campsite stood before them, or rather, what was left of it. The tents were shredded, their fabric hanging in tatters. Pots and utensils lay scattered, and claw marks gouged the trees. But the most chilling sight was the blood, dark, sticky pools glistening in the moonlight. "Where are the people?" Ravi asked, his voice trembling. Arjun shook his head. "No bodies. Just this." Jennifer knelt to examine the claw marks. "These aren't from any animal I know," she murmured. "They're too large, too deliberate." A sudden rustling in the bushes made everyone jump. Vikram shone his flashlight, revealing a bloodied journal half buried in the dirt. Priya picked it up, flipping through the pages. "It belongs to someone named Rajesh," she said. "He wrote about hearing strange noises at night. Said something was stalking them." As she read aloud, the rustling grew louder, closer. Arjun raised his rifle, scanning the trees. "Back to the jeep," he ordered. But before they could move, a shadow darted across the clearing, a blur of motion too fast to track. The group froze. Then, with a deafening roar, the shadow charged. The first attack. Chaos erupted. Arjun fired blindly, the muzzle flashes briefly illuminating a hulking, black shape. It collided with the jeep, sending it skidding several feet. Screams filled the air as the group scrambled to regroup. In the confusion, Ravi was knocked off his feet. He crawled toward the jeep, but the creature lunged, its glowing yellow eyes locking onto him. Before anyone could react, it dragged him into the underbrush. "Ravi!" Jennifer screamed, but he was gone. His cries faded into the distance, leaving only the ragged sound of her sobs. "We can't stay here," Arjun shouted, grabbing Priya and Vikram. "Run!" They sprinted through the jungle, guided only by the faint light of the moon and the beam of Arjun's flashlight. The creature's growls echoed behind them, growing louder with each passing second. The cave. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a cave hidden beneath a rocky overhang. Arjun ushered them inside and quickly covered the entrance with branches and leaves. "Is this thing safe?" Sahil asked, clutching his camera like a lifeline. "No," Arjun admitted, "but it's better than being out there." Jennifer sat against the wall, her face streaked with tears. "What was that thing?" Arjun hesitated. "There's a legend about this jungle. They say it's protected by a spirit, a guardian that turns violent if its territory is threatened. Are you telling me this is some kind of ghost?" Sahil scoffed. "Not a ghost," Arjun said. "Something worse." Priya opened the journal again, her hands trembling. Rajesh mentioned the same thing. He wrote about finding strange carvings on trees, like warnings to stay away. He thought it was a joke. "Well, it's not a joke now." Vikram snapped. "Ravi's dead, and we're next if we don't figure out what to do." As if in response, a low growl echoed from outside the cave. The final stand. The group huddled together, their breath shallow as the growl grew closer. The creature was hunting them, its heavy footsteps crunching leaves and snapping branches. Arjun gripped his rifle, his knuckles white. "Stay quiet. If it comes in, I'll distract it. You all run." "No way," Vikram said. "We stick together." Before they could argue further, the creature burst through the makeshift barrier. It was massive, its fur as black as the void and its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The smell of blood and decay clung to it like a shroud. Arjun fired, the bullet hitting its shoulder. The creature roared in pain but didn't falter. It swiped at him, sending him crashing into the cave wall. Jennifer grabbed a burning branch from their makeshift fire and swung it wildly. The flame seemed to momentarily deter the beast, but it soon advanced again, undeterred. "Over here!" Sahil shouted, trying to draw its attention. He snapped photo after photo, the flash disorienting the creature for a brief moment. But the respite was short-lived. It turned on him, its claws slicing through the air. In a desperate move, Priya threw the journal at the creature. It landed in the fire, the pages igniting instantly. The creature recoiled, letting out an ear-piercing screech as the flames consumed the journal. It thrashed wildly, its movements erratic. "Run!" Arjun gasped, clutching his injured arm. The group didn't need to be told twice. They bolted from the cave, their hearts pounding as they raced through the jungle. The creature's roars faded behind them, but the fear lingered like a shadow. The morning after. By dawn, they reached the edge of the jungle. A rescue team found them wandering near the main road, disheveled and terrified. When asked what had happened, Arjun simply said, "The jungle doesn't like intruders." Authorities searched the area but found no trace of Ravi, the campsite, or the creature. The official report chalked it up to a wild animal attack, but the survivors knew better. Weeks later, Sahil developed the photos from that night. In one of them, taken just before the attack, a pair of glowing yellow eyes stared back from the darkness. The Whispering Grove. The roar of the jeep's engine echoed faintly through the dense canopy of the Shikra jungle as the last golden rays of sunlight slipped behind the horizon. A group of 5 thrill-seekers, Sarah, her younger brother Kevin, adventurous couple Amrita and Raj, and their guide Dev, had set out for an evening safari, eager to explore the uncharted depths of the wilderness. Dev, a seasoned tracker with a grizzled face and a no-nonsense demeanor, had warned them about the dangers lurking in the shadows, but the excitement of adventure dulled their fears. The Shikra jungle is ancient, Dev began as they navigated a narrow dirt path. Older than the cities, older than the kingdoms. They say it holds secrets that even time has forgotten. "What kind of secrets?" Kevin asked, his voice filled with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Dev glanced at him. "Some things are better left unsaid." The group laughed, dismissing his cryptic tone as part of the safari's mystique. But as the light faded and the forest thickened, their laughter grew less frequent, replaced by uneasy glances into the encroaching darkness. The whisper. Around dusk, they reached an open clearing. Dev cut the engine, allowing the silence of the jungle to envelop them. The air was thick and heavy, and the usual symphony of crickets and frogs seemed muted, as though the jungle itself was holding its breath. Amrita pointed to a cluster of towering trees in the distance. Their trunks were unusually wide, their gnarled branches twisting together like skeletal fingers. "What's that place?" she asked. Dev's expression darkened. "That's the Whispering Grove. We stay away from there." "Why? What's in there?" Sarah asked, intrigued. "Bad things happen to those who go there," Dev said flatly. "This isn't a place for stories. We should keep moving." But before he could restart the jeep, a faint sound drifted through the clearing, a soft, melodic whisper. It was barely audible, more like the rustling of leaves, yet it carried an undeniable pull. "Did you hear that?" Raj asked, his eyes scanning the grove. "It's just the wind," Dev said sharply. But his tone betrayed his unease. The whisper came again, louder this time. It sounded almost human, like a voice calling out from deep within the grove. Kevin leaned forward, straining to hear. "It's saying something." "Enough," Dev snapped. "We're leaving. Now." But before he could turn the jeep around, the whispering grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't coming from one direction anymore. It seemed to surround them, echoing from every shadow. The trees of the grove swayed unnaturally, their branches creaking like old bones. Amrita clutched Raj's arm. "What is that?" Dev's face was pale. "Keep your heads down and don't listen. The grove's pull." Despite Dev's warning, Kevin couldn't resist. He stepped out of the jeep, his gaze fixed on the grove. "It's calling us," he murmured as though in a trance. "Kevin, get back here." Sarah shouted, but her brother didn't respond. Raj and Amrita tried to grab him, but the whispering grew deafening, drowning out their voices. Kevin stumbled toward the grove, his movements slow and deliberate, like a puppet being drawn on invisible strings. Dev cursed under his breath, grabbing his rifle. "Stay here," he barked before running after Kevin. The others hesitated for a moment before following, unable to leave Kevin and Dev behind. As they approached the grove, the air grew colder, and the ground beneath their feet felt spongy, as though the earth itself recoiled from their presence. The whispering was louder now, words barely discernible. "Come closer, join us." They found Kevin standing at the base of one of the massive trees, staring up at its branches. Dev grabbed him by the shoulder, shaking him violently. "Snap out of it, boy." Kevin blinked, his expression dazed. I heard them. They need help." "There's no one here," Dev growled. "We're leaving." But as he turned to lead them back, the ground trembled. The trees groaned, their branches twisting and contorting as though alive. The whispering turned into a chorus of anguished cries. "Run!" Dev shouted. The shadows awakened. The group sprinted back toward the jeep, but the jungle seemed to shift around them, the path twisting and doubling back on itself. The cries grew louder, accompanied by a sinister rustling, as though something was chasing them. Raj tripped on a root, pulling Amrita down with him. Sarah and Kevin stopped to help, but Dev grabbed them all, dragging them to their feet. "No stopping. Keep moving." Ahead, the jeep came into view, but just as they reached it, a dark figure stepped out of the shadows. It was humanoid but distorted, its limbs too long and its face obscured by a swirling mass of black mist. Its voice was a cacophony of whispers. "Why'd you run? You came to us." Dev raised his rifle, firing a shot. The figure didn't flinch. Instead, it raised an arm, and the whispering grew so loud that the group fell to their knees, clutching their ears. "Cover your ears and don't look at it," Dev shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. The group obeyed, crawling toward the jeep as Dev fired again and again. Finally, with a guttural roar, the figure vanished and the whispering ceased. The escape. Dev hauled the group into the jeep, slamming the door shut before flooring the accelerator. The vehicle tore through the jungle, bouncing violently over roots and rocks. No one spoke, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. When they finally burst out of the jungle and onto the main road, the tension in the jeep lifted slightly. But Dev didn't stop until they were miles away, pulling into a ranger station at the jungle's edge. What was that thing?" Raj finally managed to ask. Dev lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "The grove is cursed," he said after a long pause. "They say it's where the spirits of those who died in the jungle linger, trapped and hungry for company." But why Kevin? Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Why did it call to him? Dev shook his head. The Grove chooses who it wants. You're lucky it didn't want all of us. The aftermath. The group never returned to the jungle. Kevin recovered physically, but he was never the same. He spoke of voices in his dreams, of shadows that moved in the corners of his vision. One day, Sarah found him sitting by the window, staring into the distance. They're still calling me, he whispered, his eyes unfocused. I think I left a part of myself there. Years later, rumors of disappearances near the Whispering Grove continued to circulate. Some said the spirits were growing stronger, their whispers reaching further into the jungle. Others believed the grove itself was alive, drawing the unsuspecting to their doom. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The Shikra jungle was no place for the curious or the careless. The Curse of the Emerald Shrine. The jungle had no name. Locals referred to it as Shiavan, or the Shadowed Forest, but even they avoided speaking of it after dark. It was said that deep within the heart of the jungle lay an ancient shrine, long abandoned, guarded by something unnatural. Yet, the tales of the shrine's emerald-encrusted idol, worth a fortune, drew adventurers and treasure seekers despite the warnings. When Samir, a wildlife photographer, heard about it from an old villager during his trip to the outskirts of Shiavan, he dismissed it as superstition. A shrine deep in the jungle? Sounds like a hidden gem for my portfolio, he had said. His companions, Mira, a botanist, Ravi, an engineer, and Kanal, a wildlife documentarian, agreed. Their guide, Kamal, however, was far less enthusiastic. You don't want to go there, Kamal warned. Those who try to find the shrine never come back. Samir smirked. Don't tell me you believe in ghosts, Kamal. I don't have to believe, Kamal said grimly. The jungle decides who leaves. Despite his hesitation, Kamal relented after they promised him a generous payment. With that, the group set out into Shiavan in search of adventure and the mysterious shrine. Into the shadows. The first day of the expedition was uneventful. The jungle was lush and vibrant, alive with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. Mira was ecstatic, cataloging rare plants, while Samir snapped photos of a vibrant macaw. Kanal, with his camcorder, documented their journey, while Ravi mapped their path using his GPS. But as they ventured deeper, the jungle began to change. The canopy grew thicker, blotting out the sunlight, and the air became heavy, damp, and suffocating. The sounds of wildlife faded, replaced by an eerie silence that set their nerves on edge. By late afternoon, they came across a peculiar clearing. In the center stood an ancient tree, its bark twisted and blackened as if scorched by fire. Surrounding its base were small carvings, figures of animals, humans, and shapes too strange to describe. Mira crouched to examine one, brushing dirt from its surface. These carvings are centuries old, she whispered. This must have been a ritual site. Let's not linger, Kamal urged, his voice tight. The shrine's path begins here, but we need to move before dark. As they moved on, the air seemed to thrum with an unseen energy. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the group began to feel as though they were being watched. The shrine. By nightfall, they reached the shrine. It was smaller than expected, a crumbling stone structure overrun with vines and moss. At its center stood the idol, a gleaming figure of a deity carved from stone, its eyes inlaid with emeralds that glowed faintly even in the dim light. Samir whistled low. It's real. I can't believe it. Don't touch it, Kamal warned. The stories say the idol is cursed. Those who disturb it awaken something they can't escape. Come on, Kamal, Ravi said. It's just an old statue. But Kamal stood firm, his face pale. This is a place of death. Ignoring the guide's protests, Samir raised his camera to capture the idol. The flash illuminated the shrine, revealing a second set of carvings along its base. Unlike the ones at the tree, these depicted twisted, monstrous figures devouring humans. Mira frowned. These carvings, they're warnings. Relax, Samir said, stepping closer to the idol. Let me just get a better angle. As he snapped another photo, a strange sound echoed through the shrine, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from all directions at once. Did anyone else hear that? Kanal asked, his voice trembling. Kamal grabbed his arm. We leave. Now. But before they could turn to leave, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The jungle erupted in a deafening cacophony, branches snapping, leaves rustling, and an unearthly screech that sent chills down their spines. The shadows around the shrine came alive. The guardian. From the darkness emerged a figure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was massive, its body a writhing mass of vines and shadows, its eyes glowing the same eerie green as the emeralds. Its shape shifted constantly, part human, part beast, part something else. The creature roared, a sound that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. Samir stumbled backward, dropping his camera. "What the hell is that?" Ravi shouted. "The Guardian," Kamal said, his voice barely audible. "It protects the shrine." Without warning, the creature lunged, its vine-like limbs snapping through the air. The group scattered, their flashlights casting frantic beams of light as they ran into the jungle. The jungle's wrath. The creature pursued them relentlessly, its movements impossibly fast despite its size. It seemed to know the jungle intimately, cutting them off at every turn. Ravi tripped over a root and fell hard, the GPS slipping from his hand. As he scrambled to retrieve it, the creature appeared behind him. "Ravi, run!" Mira screamed, but it was too late. The creature's vines wrapped around Ravi, pulling him into the shadows. His screams echoed briefly before being swallowed by the jungle. Panic set in. Samir, Mira, Kanal, and Kamal ran blindly through the darkness, the sounds of snapping branches and the creature's growls hot on their heels. Kamal led them to a small ravine, urging them to climb down. "This way," he hissed. "It can't follow us here." But as they reached the bottom, the air grew colder, and the whispering began. It was faint at first, barely distinguishable from the rustling leaves, but it grew louder with each passing second. "It's inside my head," Mira said, clutching her ears. "Don't listen," Kamal shouted. "It's trying to break you." Kanal stumbled, dropping his camcorder. The whispers seemed to target him, calling his name in a dozen different voices. He froze, his face pale and his eyes wide. "Kanal, keep moving," Samir shouted, grabbing his arm. But Kanal shook his head. "It's beautiful," he murmured, turning back toward the ravine. Before anyone could stop him, he began to climb back up. "Kanal, no!" Kamal shouted, but the whispers drowned out his voice. As Kanal reached the top, the creature was waiting. Its shadow enveloped him, and he vanished without a sound. The final escape. The remaining three stumbled through the jungle, exhausted and terrified. The whispers faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that was somehow worse. When they finally emerged onto a dirt road, Kamal collapsed to his knees, his face streaked with tears. "We're not safe yet," he said. "The jungle doesn't let go so easily." As if on cue, the shadows around them began to move again. The creature emerged from the tree line, its glowing eyes fixed on them. Kamal stood, raising his hands. "Go," he shouted to Samir and Mira. "I'll hold it off." "No, Kamal," Mira cried, but he shoved her toward the road. "This is my fault for bringing you here. Run." Reluctantly, Samir and Mira fled, their breaths ragged as they sprinted toward the faint glow of headlights in the distance. Behind them, they heard Kamal's shouts, followed by the creature's roar. Then silence. They reached a ranger station just as dawn broke, collapsing into the arms of the startled rangers. When they tried to explain what had happened, the rangers exchanged uneasy glances. "There is no shrine," one of them said. "No one goes that deep into Shiavan." "But we saw it," Samir insisted. "The idol, the carvings." "Many have claimed the same," the ranger said. "But when we search, there's nothing there." The aftermath. Samir and Mira left Shiavan the next day, shaken and broken. Samir retrieved his camera, but when he reviewed the photos, every image of the shrine was gone. The idol, the carvings, everything had vanished, as though it had never existed. Months later, Samir woke one night to the sound of whispers outside his window. When he looked out, he saw glowing green eyes staring back at him from the darkness. The whispers of Sangatsi jungle. It was the kind of adventure they'd always dreamed of. A week-long jungle safari deep in the heart of the Sangatsi jungle, a dense, largely uncharted forest nestled in a remote corner of South Asia. For the group of 6 friends, Anya, Raj, Vikram, Priya, Neha, and Rishi, this trip was a perfect escape from the drudgery of urban life. They had all read about the jungle's mystique. Sangatsi was famous for its untamed wilderness, rare animal species, and unsettling legends. The locals whispered about Chalgat, an ancient village swallowed by the jungle centuries ago. Rumors spoke of strange disappearances and the haunting echoes of voices that weren't quite human. But the group had laughed off the warnings. They were young, confident, and eager for the thrill of the unknown. Day 1, the arrival. Their guide, Sundeep, was a wiry, middle-aged man with leathery skin and sharp eyes. He greeted them at the edge of the jungle with a simple warning. "Stay close to me at all times," he said, his voice low and serious. Sangatsi doesn't forgive carelessness. The first day was uneventful. They marveled at the towering trees, their trunks wrapped in thick vines, and the cacophony of exotic birds. That night, around the campfire, they joked about the supposed curse of Chalgat. "I bet this curse is just some old village tale to scare off outsiders," Vikram said, poking at the fire with a stick. Sandeep, who had been quietly sipping tea, looked up sharply. "It's no tale," he said. "People who go looking for Chalgat don't return." The group exchanged nervous glances, but they dismissed it as superstition. They were here for fun, after all. Day 2, the first omen. The second day began with a trek to a watering hole. The group was thrilled to spot elephants and a distant tiger lapping at the water's edge. But as they made their way back to the camp, something strange happened. Priya paused, squinting into the trees. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" Raj replied, adjusting his backpack. It sounded like whispering. The others brushed it off as the wind rustling through the leaves. But as they continued, Priya couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, as they sat around the campfire, the whispers returned. Faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. It seemed to come from the trees, a hushed murmur in a language none of them recognized. Neha clutched her jacket tighter. "This place is weird," she admitted. "It's just your imagination," Vikram said, though his own voice betrayed uncertainty. Sandeep, sitting a little away from the group, muttered under his breath. "Chalgat is awake." Day 3, the lost path. The next morning, Sandeep announced they'd be exploring a different route. "The usual trail feels wrong," he explained, though he didn't elaborate. As they ventured deeper, the jungle grew denser, the air heavier. The sunlight barely pierced through the thick canopy, casting everything in a dim, greenish hue. Around midday, they stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. The tents were tattered, and the supplies were scattered as if someone had left in a hurry. "What happened here?" Anya whispered. Sandeep knelt by the remains of a campfire. "This wasn't supposed to be here," he said, his voice tight. "What do you mean?" Rishi asked. Sandeep stood abruptly. "We need to keep moving." But as they pressed on, the trail began to fade, swallowed by the jungle. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was no longer the wind. It was voices, disembodied and chilling, calling their names. By evening, they realized they were lost. Day 4, the shadow in the fog. A thick fog descended overnight, muffling the jungle's usual sounds. The group huddled in their tents, too afraid to speak. Around midnight, Anya awoke to the sound of footsteps outside her tent. "Sandeep," she called, her voice trembling. The footsteps stopped. She unzipped her tent slightly, peering out. In the dim light of the dying campfire, she saw a figure standing motionless at the edge of the clearing. "Sandeep," she called again. The figure turned slowly, and Anya's blood ran cold. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its face was wrong. Distorted, as if someone had tried to stretch human features over something inhuman. She screamed, waking the others. By the time they rushed out, the figure was gone. "What did you see?" Raj demanded, holding a flashlight. Anya stammered, unable to describe it. But Sandeep's face was pale. "We need to leave," he said. "At first light." Day 5, Chalgat. The whispers now followed them constantly, growing louder and more aggressive. They spoke in overlapping voices, some pleading, others mocking. Around midday, they stumbled upon ruins. Crumbling stone walls and overgrown pathways hinted at a village long forgotten. "Chalgat," Sandeep said, his voice barely audible. The air was suffocatingly still. No birds, no insects. Just the whispers, echoing off the stones. "We shouldn't be here," Neha said, clutching Rishi's arm. But something compelled them to enter. It was as if the village itself was pulling them in. At the center of the ruins stood a massive tree, its gnarled roots curling around a stone altar. The whispers crescendoed, forming words. "Stay with us." The group froze. The voice was everywhere and nowhere. And then the shadows began to move. Day 6, the first loss. That night, they decided to keep watch in shifts. Vikram volunteered for the first shift, sitting by the fire with a flashlight and a machete. When the others woke up at dawn, Vikram was gone. They found his flashlight near the altar, its beam flickering weakly. But there was no sign of him. "We need to go now," Raj said, panic evident in his voice. But Sandeep shook his head. "The jungle won't let us leave." "Not yet." Day 7, the ritual. The group dwindled quickly. Neha disappeared next, then Rishi. Each time, They heard their friends' screams echo through the jungle, only to be replaced by the whispers. By the seventh day, only Anya, Priya, and Raj remained. The whispers now spoke clearly, demanding a sacrifice. At sunset, they returned to the altar, drawn by an unseen force. Sandeep stood there, his eyes vacant, his body rigid. "They want one of you," he said in a hollow voice. "What are you talking about?" Raj shouted. "The jungle demands a soul," Sandeep replied. "Only then will it let the rest go." Anya and Priya clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces. Raj stepped forward, his jaw set. "Take me," he said. "No!" Anya cried, but it was too late. The shadows engulfed Raj, pulling him into the ground. His screams echoed long after he was gone. Day 8. Escape. At dawn, Anya and Priya awoke to find the jungle silent. The whispers were gone. Sandeep led them out, his face expressionless. When they finally emerged from the jungle, Anya looked back. The Sangatsi jungle loomed dark and foreboding, as if watching them. To this day, Anya hears the whispers in her dreams. The Eyes in the Dark. The Veldern rainforest was a place of unspoiled beauty, a paradise untouched by time. Stretching for hundreds of miles, it was said to house species of plants and animals found nowhere else on Earth. But for all its allure, the forest had a darker reputation. Locals whispered of the Lurker, an ancient entity said to stalk the depths of the jungle. For Jenna, Liam, Marcus, and Tara, this was precisely the reason they came. Self-proclaimed adventurers and thrill-seekers, they planned a 5-day jungle expedition, armed with cameras, climbing gear, and a GPS tracker. They hired a guide, an older man named Elias, who reluctantly agreed to lead them into the heart of the rainforest. "I'll take you as far as the River Maw," Elias warned on the first day, "but beyond that, you're on your own. And if you hear the churr," he paused, his eyes darkening, "you run. Do not stop, and do not look back." Liam had laughed. "What's the churr? A bird? A jaguar?" Elias didn't smile. "Pray you never find out." Day 1, the forest awakens. The rainforest was alive with sound, the chatter of monkeys, the trill of insects, the distant roar of waterfalls. Jenna couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as they trekked deeper into the jungle. "Isn't this incredible?" she said, snapping a photo of a bright red orchid. Marcus nodded. "It's like something out of a movie." But as the day wore on, the group noticed subtle changes. The jungle grew quieter, the air heavier. By the time they set up camp, even the usual sounds of night, crickets, frogs, owls, were absent. Elias sat apart from the group, muttering prayers under his breath. "What's his deal?" Tara whispered to Jenna. Jenna shrugged. "Superstitious old man. Don't worry about it." But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. Day 2, the churr. The second day began uneventfully. They crossed streams, climbed rocky inclines, and marveled at the towering trees. But as they approached the River Maw, the atmosphere shifted. Elias stopped abruptly, his face pale. "What's wrong?" Liam asked. Elias pointed ahead. A single tree stood apart from the others, its bark blackened as if scorched by fire. Strange symbols were etched into the trunk, spiraling downward in an almost hypnotic pattern. "We turn back," Elias said. "No way," Marcus replied. "We came all this way." "This is where my journey ends," Elias said firmly. "You go further, you go alone." The group argued, but Elias wouldn't budge. Eventually, they decided to continue without him, dismissing his warnings as fear or superstition. By late afternoon, they reached the River Maw, a wide, fast-moving body of water. They set up camp nearby, laughing and joking about Elias's ominous words. That night, the churr began. It started as a faint sound, like the rustling of leaves. Then it grew louder, a rapid clicking noise that seemed to echo from every direction. "What is that?" Tara whispered, clutching her flashlight. "Probably just some animal," Marcus said, though his voice lacked confidence. Jenna shone her flashlight into the trees. For a moment, she thought she saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her, but when she blinked, they were gone. "Let's just get some sleep," Liam suggested. But none of them slept well that night. Day 3, the stalker. The next morning, they found strange footprints around their campsite. They were large, three-toed, and unlike anything any of them had seen before. "Could it be a jaguar?" Tara asked. "Jaguars don't have feet like this," Liam replied, frowning. They pressed on, though the mood was tense. The jungle seemed darker, the air thicker. And the churr returned, faint but persistent. By afternoon, they realized they were lost. The GPS tracker malfunctioned, showing their position as a blank void. Frustrated, Marcus climbed a tree to try and get his bearings. As he reached the top, he froze. "What do you see?" Jenna called up. Marcus didn't answer. "Marcus?" Liam shouted. Slowly, Marcus began to climb down, his face pale. "There's something up there," he said, his voice trembling. "Something big. What did you see?" Tara pressed. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. But it was watching me." That night, the chirr grew louder. Day 4, the first disappearance. By dawn, Marcus was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his gear untouched. They found drag marks leading into the jungle, as if he'd been pulled from his tent. "Marcus!" Liam shouted, running after the marks. "Wait!" Jenna cried, but Liam didn't stop. They followed the trail for what felt like hours, but it abruptly ended in a clearing. There was no sign of Marcus. "What the hell is going on?" Tara whispered, tears streaming down her face. The chirr answered, louder than ever. "Run," Jenna said. They sprinted back to the campsite, their hearts pounding. The whispers began then, soft and mocking, just at the edge of hearing. Day 5, the eyes in the dark. By the 5th day, they were completely disoriented. Tara was weak from exhaustion, and Liam's nerves were fraying. The chirr followed them relentlessly, now accompanied by the faint sound of laughter. It was high-pitched and inhuman, echoing through the trees. That night, Liam snapped. "I'm not staying here to die," he shouted, grabbing his gear. "Liam, don't," Jenna begged. But he stormed off into the jungle. An hour later, they heard his screams. Jenna and Tara huddled together, too terrified to investigate. The jungle around them seemed alive, the trees twisting and shifting in the dark. And then they saw them, the eyes. Dozens of glowing eyes appeared in the shadows, surrounding them. The chirr grew deafening, and the laughter turned into guttural growls. Tara bolted, but she didn't make it far. Jenna heard her scream, followed by a sickening crunch. Jenna was alone now. Day 6, the lurker. Jenna didn't sleep. She sat by the dying campfire, clutching a machete, her eyes darting around the clearing. At dawn, the jungle fell silent. And then she saw it. The lurker emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and indistinct, like smoke given shape. Its eyes burned like embers, and its limbs were impossibly long. Jenna froze as it approached, its movements unnaturally fluid. "Why?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The creature tilted its head, as if considering her question. Then it spoke, its voice a chorus of overlapping tones. "This is our domain," it said. "You trespassed. And now, you belong to us." Jenna's screams echoed through the jungle, but no one was there to hear them. Epilogue: The Return of Elias. Weeks later, Elias stood at the edge of the rainforest, staring into the trees. The group's belongings had been found, scattered and bloodied, but there was no sign of the adventurers. Elias lit a candle, placing it on the ground. "The jungle always takes what it's owed," he murmured. As he turned to leave, the chirr began again, faint but unmistakable. Elias didn't look back.
If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel.